Let's talk about this for the start of before you met the Maharishi. What was Susan's life before all this magic was happening? What was going on?
With the tikka, nothing rhymes with that but chicken tikka. We name drop here with Stefan and all his friends.
Welcome. Hey, Susan. Hey, how you doing?
I'm
How are
doing
you?
great.
Good to
Great.
see you. Good to see you this morning. So we'll talk about a little about your book, which right over here. I have it right here. Everybody that's out there in YouTube, you could check that out right there. This beautiful heart right there. It's nice and wonderful. Susan, the pictures are so cool in here. First of all, let me just show really quick everybody out there these pictures. Right here, we got some great, fabulous pictures over here, and you could see Susan. Right there's a great picture of Susan right there with Robbie Krieger from the Doors. We'll put all that good stuff up there. Susan, you're back. Okay, so Susan, excuse us for the technical difficulties. Everything will be edited on here, but this is raw and Patreon. Let's talk about this for the start of before you met the Maharishi. What was Susan's life before all this magic was happening? What was going on?
Well, I was a hippie. It was the 60s. I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah.
And those of us who were flower children, perhaps you might know, might not know, we were really sincere about experiencing altered states of consciousness, higher consciousness. And our gurus at that time were Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, who later became Ram Dass. They wrote a book called The Psychedelic Experience. They were telling us to turn on, tune in, and drop out. So that's what we were doing. We were trying to reach nirvana through LSD, because that's what they told us we could do. If we drop LSD, we turn on, tune in, and drop out, then we would attain the spiritual enlightenment that we were seeking. So, it wasn't just all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. A lot of it was about this altered consciousness.
So what was the whole group that you were hanging as a kid, the scene that you were with your friends? What was the age of the whole gang?
Well, at that time, I was 18 years old when I was going to art school out there in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
And we were hippies, we dressed in these wild outfits. It was all about make love, not war. I did a lot of that. And but I was really seeking this higher consciousness. So I was reading books like The Way of Zen by Alan Watts and Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi. And I was reading the Buddhist scriptures. And in the books of Alan Watts, he said that you have to find a meditation guide. Well, in 1966 in Berkeley, California, you didn't exactly go to the yellow pages and look up meditation guide or anything remotely similar. So I asked a friend, well, how do I find this meditation guide? And he said, well, have you ever tried to meditate on your own? I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I lay down on my bed. That's how clueless I was. I didn't know that you're supposed to sit up when you meditate. I lay on my bed and sort of prayed for or asked for a meditation. And immediately I was propelled into this ecstatic state. I could feel this cord or rush of energy rushing from the tips of my toes all the way to the top of my head. And I felt like I was plugged into a cosmic electric socket, but in a most ecstatic way. And a little did I know that not only did I have my first meditation experience, but also Kundalini Awakening all at the same time.
Yeah.
And that was my really introduction to higher consciousness. And then a friend took me to the Transcendental Meditation Center. There was no teacher there. I had to wait 9 months to even learn meditation, but eventually the teacher came during the summer of love, I might add. In August of 1967, just a few weeks before the Beatles learned TM, I learned TM there in Berkeley, California.
Oh, wow. So okay, but you had a little knowledge of where to go with it to get your mind in that Zen part before you were, you were dabbling with it? Nothing.
Yeah, through drugs, through LSD, through
Okay.
smoking
Okay.
grass.
So that
But-
would take you. Yeah. But you were looking for a natural high, which is why you kind of like,
Right.
okay, you had enough of, the party, and it's like, okay, where can I
Well-
take this but a natural thing? Here, there's her book, Maharishi and Me, and let's get back to the stories with her right here. Okay, you're back. Okay, see, you just went somewhere. You decided to meditate on me on the show. I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. But were you looking for that? Because you're young. When kids are young, they're partying, LSD, whatever. I mean, I guess
It was not a party.
It wasn't it wasn't a party, huh?
Well, the first time I took LSD, I had a major psychotic breakdown.
You did.
I never came down from the drug. Weeks and months later, I was having LSD flashbacks.
Wow.
Really often. I was hallucinating. It was a horrendous experience. So I wasn't really looking for more drugs.
Yeah.
I was really looking for, like you said, a natural high.
A natural high. So when the first time you did LSD, was that how old were you your first time on LSD?
I was 18.
18 years old. So everything happened basically at 18 years old for you, huh? 18 is when you just, okay, let me try this, let me try that. And it was only one time you ever did LSD, just that one time?
No, I took it 3 times.
Three times?
The third time I took it, I really did have a cosmic experience. But
do you remember?
Very strange.
Do you remember the third time you took it? Can you tell us?
Yes, I remember vividly. I dropped the tab. I was on a hill overlooking the ocean in Big Sur. And I dropped the tabs, and then I went into this ecstatic state, sort of a meditative state. I lay down on the grass and went into this state of consciousness. And then 4.5 hours later, 4.5 hours later, the person that I was with, I sort of opened my eyes, and he was asleep. He was lying on the grass asleep, and I nudged him and I said, what's happening? And he said, I said, what time is it? And it was 4.5 hours later. And he said, you have been in this state of consciousness with a blissful countenance, blissful state, looking like you were in another world for 4 hours. And I said, what? I was completely unconscious. I felt robbed of my nirvana because I wasn't even conscious for it.
Oh my God. So it just put you out. It was just done. That was it. So that was that the time you go, okay, now I'm searching and I want to go deeper. Is that where it leads you to over here?
Really, I was looking. There was no end to my searching until I found Transcendental Meditation.
And how about relationships, like with boyfriends and this and that?
Oh, I had a gazillion of them. You have to understand, it was make love, not war. Mm-hmm. Those of us who were really into the hippie lifestyle, I was very promiscuous.
It was a different time, the 60s. And I guess that's why they call it the swinging 60s, right?
I think so, yeah.
All right, for the viewers out there, let's talk about your book. Let's tap on some things. I love your stories because you know what? You're more rock and roll than Zeppelin right now with these stories. It's great. I love it. You know what? We're going to go here. And since you are, a rock and roll girl, what are you, give me 3 top vinyl albums that you had when you around that time that was the records. Do you remember the records that you have your choice at that time?
Well, Bob Dylan's record, and the Beatles. I was into the Beatles and I was into Dylan, and that was really it. I anytime a Beatles record would come out, I'd be there at the music store picking it up.
So you're a big Beatles fan?
Sure, I was a Beatle maniac when I was a teenager.
What was the first Beatle album for you that did it?
The first one that came out. It was called what was it called? Introducing the Beatles.
That's right, Introducing the Beatles. Which then America got Meet with the Beatles, Meet the Beatles.
Then it was Meet the Beatles, yeah.
All, but as all the Beatle crazies, we all have all the copies. Yeah. Which favorite Beatles song?
I'd say Across the Universe.
Really? Okay. All right. Favorite Beatle?
George.
Really, George? Okay, all right. Worst Beatle song that you don't want to listen to?
Mary Jane. Awful.
Okay.
What a mess that was.
Not number 9, Revolution number 9. That one you could do.
No, that was okay actually. Number
All right.
9 was okay.
Did you do LSD and listen to number 9 ever?
No, I did LSD and listened to the Revolver album because at the time that I was taking LSD, Revolver, that was the LSD album that they made, you know. So I was listening to Tomorrow Never Knows when I was on LSD.
Wow. What was that like? Do you remember the experience listening to that song on LSD?
I was hallucinating and I was scared to death and I was paranoid. It was horrendous. As I said, it was a horrible experience. My first LSD trip.
And a disclaimer out there for any young kids that are watching, or adults that want to go crazy right now in their lives, and because of this whole corona and you're locked in your house, do not try LSD alone in the house. Be very careful. Just get the book Maharishi and Me by Susan, or she may have some tips on how to meditate. So now, what brought you here? I don't want to give away the book because we want people to go check out your lovely book here, but let's give a little highlights of the book that you would like to share with us. I mean, I'm very curious about the Maharishi as a person, what type of person he was, what type of man he was. The first time you met him, because now he's built up, you're getting into this, and as anybody would meet, if you met Elvis or if you met John Lennon, we create these magical images of our idols before we meet them. And was it the same for you when you met Maharishi?
It was really weird. Okay, so after I learned TM, I was having such amazing experiences with it, and it transformed my life so quickly, so magically. I became a volunteer at the TM Center. I was helping them set up retreats. I was doing all kinds of volunteer work. And then they said that Maharishi was going to be in LA, and would I like to drive down? So a bunch of us jumped into a Woody and we drove down to LA to see Maharishi. So there we are, and Maharishi is arriving at the airport. And so we're standing in a double line to greet him, and we're all like our hands are like this and pranam and namaskar, and we are ready to say Jai Guru Dev, and a lot of us have flowers, but I was dressed like a total wild hippie. I was wearing this horrible dress from a junk store, and it looked like a rag hanging on my very skinny body. And I had all the crazy accoutrements and funky sandals and the beads and the granny glasses. And I just was dressed outrageously. And there I am standing with these wilted wildflowers that I had picked on the road on the way down there. Everyone else had flowers from a flower shop. So I'm standing there completely tense and nervous. And he's like smiling and cooing, and he's walking down the road, the corridor, and taking flowers from everyone and saying Jai Guru Dev. And he's just billing and cooing, and he doesn't stop. He just keeps walking and walking and walking till he gets to me. And then he stops. I was the only person. And he looks me up and he looks me down, and he looks me up and he looks me down. And he grabs the wildflowers from me with a kind of an angry gesture. And he's scowling at me. And then he says, Jai Guru Dev, and he walks, continues to walk. So, yeah, that was my first encounter with Maharishi.
Wow. That's a wild, huh? So so what were you thinking when he grabbed the flowers from you? Like he would abruptly, like just. Yes,
abruptly. And I'm thinking, oh, he doesn't approve,
So and there you are, you're there. It's almost like you're JFK Airport when the Beatles landed to America. Here you are, right? And you're like, well, you're thinking, oh my goodness, what did I pick the flowers? Was he mad I picked the flowers? What's going on here? Did you ever find out later what?
Well, I found out a lot later because I ended up being in his various ashrams for over 2 decades, and I was on his personal staff for 6 years. So I got to know the man
You got-
very, very well. Yes.
Very well. So so he's walking in. Was he a tall man, short?
Oh, he was 5 feet tall.
Small.
He was the shortest shortest man I've
Wow.
ever met. He was very, very slight, but very short, but very muscular. He was muscular. He was strong, and he looked regal. There was something about his presence. He had this amazing presence. It would knock you over, really, being around him, and also had this amazing love vibration. He just exuded love, and he was the happiest person I ever met, and he was always laughing and giggling. The press called him the giggling guru. They named him that.
He had a high pitched voice because you don't.
He did.
He had a
high pitched voice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so legendary when you look back at the old clips of the Maharishi, just video clips of with him with the Beatles, because that's a lot of us do know him from the Beatles. And if anybody doesn't know, you've been under a rock. But when you just like this picture right here, when you look at him and just you could sense it. It's like that big. It's like that oomph. That's why I was asking you, when you first met him, it's like we build them up in our head, these idols of ours, whether it's Elvis or the Beatles, and they're bigger than life. And then you're like, okay. And then getting to know them. And, you got to hang out with a lot of people there. Now, around the time when you went there, you got to meet, and here's a picture from your book. Let me put this up. It's in the book, everybody. But when I open it, it doesn't do just right here. Check this out. That's a great picture of you with Robbie Krieger of the Doors.
That's actually not Robbie Krieger.
Oh, it's not? I thought it was.
In the caption, it says I was wearing a ring that Robbie Krieger had given me.
Oh, forget it. I'm done. That's it. Wait, who is that with you then?
That was a guy that I was in love with at the time.
Oh, that's not Robbie
Krieger. From Holland.
What's his name?
His name was Fred Denowden.
Okay, I thought that was Robbie. So you went a ring from Robbie Krieger?
I was wearing a ring from Robbie Krieger because I met him. Well, there was a lot of celebrities that were around Maharishi.
Yeah.
And I was at a Squaw Valley course in 1968 in August. And that's where I met the Doors. Robbie and John were there. And so Robbie and I had a little flirtation. And he gave me this beautiful ring.
So there you go. So now we're getting into deep stuff here. So did you date Robbie Krieger or just
No, I didn't really. We just had a flirtation during that course.
Okay. You don't have to get deep on it. I'm just curious. I'm okay, but you got to know each other. Let's just put it that way. You and Robbie. Wow. So he lit your fire, basically.
Definitely light my fire was Robbie Krieger. Definitely lit my fire for me.
Now you're over here. How did you become the Maharishi's assistant? How did you work it up from there?
Oh, well, I just continued to take all his courses, and I wanted to be with him, and I was really just focused on I want to be with Maharishi. Mm-hmm. And so at one of the courses that I was on, I asked if I could join his international staff. And he said, yes. It was really that simple. And there were very few people on his staff, by the way. It was a very privileged position. Mm-hmm. But he said yes. And so I ended up spending 6 years in Europe with him on his staff. So Prudence is exactly the same age that I am.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And both of us went through the same thing. And that is that, well, she learned TM before I did, 1 or 2 years before I did. But both of us tried to go to India to be with Maharishi. We wanted to become teachers of Transcendental Meditation. And you had to go to Rishikesh, India, which is in the foothills of the Himalayas. And you have to go there in order to become a teacher. So she kept applying for courses to go to India, and so did I. So I kept applying. I was applying to like 3 courses before I was accepted to go to India, because you had to be 24 years old and a graduate of college. Mm-hmm. Eventually, Maharishi loosened that requirement, and he allowed the younger students to go. The only reason that Prudence was able to go when she was younger was because of her sister, Mia Farrow. When Mia heard that the Beatles were going to be in India, she said to Prudence, well, I want to go to India and study with Maharishi. So Prudence arranged for Mia to talk to Maharishi on the phone. Her teacher actually arranged it. And so Maharishi talked to Mia and invited her to come to India. Well, Prudence got very jealous immediately. Like my sister, she gets everything.
Mm-hmm.
And Maharishi said he would meet with Prudence. So when he went to Harvard Law Forum to give a huge lecture there was 5,000 people that show up for his lecture there, he did meet with Mia, and he met with Prudence as well. And he gave Prudence permission to come to India with Mia. So she was the youngest student there when the Beatles were there. And she took the course, and she was thrilled to take the course because she was so into meditation. And she didn't want to leave her room. She just wanted to meditate all the time. And unfortunately, she was in the barracks with the Beatles who were making all this noise. But, she just continued to meditate, although she asked Maharishi to move her to another building. But the ashram was totally full. So there was no place to accommodate her. So she had to stay there. So she was just staying inside and meditating and meditating and meditating. Unfortunately, when she was younger, when she was a teenager, she had really taken a lot of drugs and alcohol. In fact, it was a very serious situation. Her drug and alcohol use was major, and she ended up in a mental institution for a while.
Wow.
And she had some really troubling years. Unfortunately, her parents were really not there. She was raised by housekeepers, and they were lax. When they were in Connecticut, they would have these parties, these drug parties, and junkies would be there, and it was a bad scene.
Wow.
So Prudence had some issues. And when she went to India and she was in the long meditations, because people were meditating up to 18 hours a day. I mean, they were meditating all the time. Back then, they used to do that on the TM courses. They don't do that anymore, but they used to do
18 hours a day. Wow.
Or, like John and George, when they were there, the Beatles, John and George, they did 8 hours a day. But some of the students there were meditating all the time, including Prudence. And there was a period during that course where Maharishi told them to go into their rooms for 5 days and not come out and have the food delivered to their doors if they wished. It wasn't a requirement, but he did suggest that they do that. Prudence had already been just not coming out hardly at all. So, but when the 5th day of that silence, Prudence really had a psychotic episode, unfortunately. And she was throwing things in a room. She was screaming. They had to actually take her from the barracks where she was staying in the Beatles building. They had to, there was a guy, they had to move him from his room and put her in his room, and he ended up in this laundry room.
Oh, wow.
It was the only place they could put him. So, but what happened was Maharishi really took wonderful care of Prudence. She went to him every day for 3 weeks to his bungalow. She was taken over there every day, and within 3 weeks, she was absolutely cured. She came out, she was happy, she was smiling, she was talking to people. And since then, she has been incredible. She's an amazing person. Her story really has had a happy ending. She got married, has had several children. She's a Sanskrit scholar. She got a PhD. I mean, she's just amazing woman. And she was on my course with me in India. So she did come back to other courses. So she was on my course in India. And so that's where I got to know
That's where you get to know her pretty good. So, dear Prudence, won't you come out to play? The sun is up. This, all the words, huh?
Yeah.
It's basically that. So that's what the whole song is really around. That whole experience of her.
It is. A lot of the Beatles songs that they wrote in India were just things that were going on there.
Yeah.
Dear Prudence was one. Continuing Story of Bungalow Bill was another one. And Mother Nature's Son. There were several of them that were really based upon what was going on.
What was going on? So let's ask, what are the secret meanings in the songs? Let's say Revolution. Let's go for that one first. I'm
glad you chose Revolution because it's very interesting that John Lennon wrote about revolution. It was the 60s. It was a time of revolution. The Vietnam War was going on. But people don't realize that that song was about something called the Maharishi Effect. And what in the world is that? So Maharishi, ever since he began teaching meditation in 1955, as early as 1955, he declared that if a small percentage of the world population would practice the meditation technique that he was teaching, at that time it was called deep meditation, that we could create world peace throughout the world. He believed that because the vibrations of just a few individuals, those vibrations, positive vibrations going out into the atmosphere, that would influence other people and the world could be at peace. So he later in his career in the 1970s, he decided he wanted to prove that. So what he would do is he would send meditators to war-torn areas and crime-ridden areas. And then his scientists would do statistical analyses. And what they would find is that the crime rate would go down, the war would subside, whatever it was, that truly meditating in large groups, people meditating together, would create this effect. And it was called the Maharishi Effect. So that was what John Lennon was talking about when he was saying, you got to free your mind instead. We want to change your head. He was talking about what Maharishi always used to say was, in order for the forest to be green, the trees must be green. In order for the world to be at peace, individuals must be at peace. And I always thought that made a lot of sense, because how can you have a world at peace with warring, conflicted individuals? So that Maharishi Effect was the idea of, let's get as many people as possible to practice meditation, and then that will change the world. So that's what the song Revolution was about.
Wow. Well, I didn't know that. It's crazy because for that whole White Album time, that era, he was pretty much the fifth Beatle. You know what's weird about it all? They lost Brian Epstein when the Beatles went to India in 67. So Brian, I think, and I could correct me, August 67 is when he passed away. So the Beatles lost their father figure while they were looking for something else, which is weird. And here you got them going back there and they're writing this music, and it's like the Maharishi for that short time was a big influence on them, where Brian left off, the Maharishi took over. That's what I'm seeing over here. How about everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey?
That is one of the songs that's most about Maharishi. Now, why would anybody think that was most about Maharishi?
Yeah.
Because of the fact that all the lyrics of that song were things that Maharishi used to say all the time. So, come on, come. Anytime Maharishi wanted to meet with me privately, meet anybody privately, he would say, come, or he would say, come on. If he wanted you to come into his meeting room or tag with him, walk with him, come along with me, that's what he would say. Come, or come on. Also, another thing he would always say is, oh, it's such a joy. It's such a joy. Everything was such a joy. So anytime he would be happy, elated about something, it was always, it's such a joy. And then the other one, another thing he always used to say when he was talking about meditation, especially if people were having problems with meditation, if they found that they were having maybe some issues coming up during meditation, which he called unwinding or unstressing, he would say, take it easy and take it as it comes.
Wow.
And he used to say that all the time. Anytime someone is having any problem at all, it was take it easy, take it as it comes. Now, John Lennon never admitted that that song was about Maharishi. And I think it's because he was so bitter towards Maharishi.
Mm.
So he never admitted it, but George admitted it. Was quoted as saying that it had some things that Maharishi used to say. The only trouble is, George, I don't know about the title. George said that everybody's got something to hide was something that Maharishi always used to say. I never heard Maharishi say that.
Okay.
Never. And I've known him, I knew him for a very long time, but maybe he said it to the Beatles in India. It's very possible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Lennon was a little bitter, huh? Towards the Maharishi.
More than a little bitter. Yeah.
A little bitter. He held on to that, huh? The
He
peace,
certainly
love.
did.
Yeah. But it's funny that he held on to that. What was the reason why he was bitter to the Maharishi?
Well, he was disillusioned. All the Beatles were disillusioned, not only John, but okay, so there's 4 Beatles. So Ringo stayed in India for 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
And he left because, frankly, he had a 6-month-old baby at home. That was the main reason he left. But also his wife, Maureen, couldn't stand the bugs. She had a paranoid thing about bugs. The legend is that one fly kept her hostage for 4 hours until Ringo came back to the bungalow, to the room. But she, in India, it was a jungle. Mm-hmm. There were scorpions, there were centipedes, there were millipedes, there were all kinds of bugs, and she didn't like bugs. So that was one reason they left. Another reason was because Ringo had peritonitis as a child, and he couldn't handle. There's a lot of food he couldn't handle. Mm-hmm. And he had brought an entire suitcase of Heinz beans cans with him, an entire suitcase of Heinz beans so that he would have something to eat. So in any case, after 10 days, that was enough for them. Mm-hmm. But Ringo did enjoy it. He had nothing but positive things to say about it. And then Paul, he stayed for 5 weeks. And the reason he left is because he had already planned to only stay about a month. But not only that, he came with Jane Asher, and Jane had to go back to London for a theatrical commitment that she had at Old Vic. So they left. Mm-hmm. And once again, he had nothing but positive things to say. He wrote a song called Cosmically Conscious, which is basically about let's become cosmically conscious, and it's such a joy, it's such a joy, it's such a joy. Those are the lyrics to that song. So he had good feelings, good vibrations about the whole thing. Yeah. John and George were the ones that stayed for quite a while. They stayed from February till April. So that's 3 months? 2 months. So 2 months. So they were really into it. They went into the long meditations. They did go up to as much as 8 hours a day of meditating. And they were going to do a film with Maharishi, a documentary. In fact, Neil Aspinall, who was one of their managers at that time, came to Rishikesh and negotiated a contract with Maharishi for this film. It was going to be about the TM organization. It was going to be about Maharishi and Maharishi's guru, whom he called Guru Dev. And they were going to do this film, and they had an exclusive contract. But unfortunately, Maharishi signed an exclusive contract with somebody else before that. And that was 4 Star Productions of Hollywood. And Maharishi's main man in the United States, his name was Charlie Lutz, who, by the way, John Lennon nicknamed him Captain Kundalini. So Charlie Lutz was in the United States, and he signed a contract with 4 Star Productions to do a film. In fact, a lawyer arrived in Rishikesh with Charlie with a signed contract that gave 4-Star Productions the right, the exclusive right, to film Maharishi for the next 5 years. So they arrive in India, and then their film crew arrives in India overnight, one night, and then John Lennon opens the door to his bungalow. He's bedheaded and bleary-eyed. He looks out into the courtyard, and what does he see? He sees a cameraman and a director, and the director yells, "Action!" So John and George are absolutely livid. This other film deal was done behind their backs, and all of a sudden they're supposed to be 2-bit players in someone else's film. So they refused to leave their rooms. They wouldn't go to the lecture hall where the lights and cameras were set up. And they just basically, it was not long after that they left.
Yeah. So they got a little, so the Maharishi went to Hollywood. Maharishi goes Hollywood at this point. And it's almost like a Bravo channel where they're doing a reality show on the Beatles, behind the Beatles' back. But didn't the Beatles see them coming in there? You know, who are all these people? Who's this? You got new people in here. They didn't think twice about it at first.
They arrived overnight.
Yeah.
The film crew arrived overnight.
Yeah.
And apparently this was all, you know,
Well, they're in the room sleeping, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're out there.
Yeah.
Wow.
But Maharishi had been warned. There were some people around him who said to him, you know, Maharishi saying, "Oh, it's okay if we sign the contract with them, and we sign the contract with them. Oh, everyone's going to work together for the glory of Guru Dev." And they said to him, "Maharishi, contracts don't work that way." Exactly.
No. You know, what about Why Don't We Do It in a Road? Well, who's that about? What meaning? That's one of my favorite Beatles songs, you know?
Oh, great. So Paul was actually sitting on the roof of his bungalow. The Beatles used to go up there to play music and so on. So he was up there, and all of a sudden he saw a troop of monkeys come by. There was a lot of monkeys in India. There's all kinds of animals there. Monkeys, in fact, at the dining room, which was really just a table outdoors with a trellis over it, where they ate all their meals, there was a sign next to the dining room said, "Beware a monkey attack," because the monkeys would come and snatch a piece of toast or two from the table. Really often they'd have to fight off the monkeys to have breakfast, as Ringo said. That was a quote from Ringo. So there's Paul sitting up there. He sees a troop of monkeys, and all of a sudden he sees a male monkey jump on the back of a female monkey, and they have sex, you know, for a few seconds. And it just occurred to him how out in the open the animals were. No big deal. They have sex, and then he moves on. And you know, and the woman, the female monkey, she moves on too. It's no big deal.
That's it.
So that's what he felt about this whole sex act. And he was thinking, well, you know, maybe human beings should be like that. Maybe they should be as uninhibited as monkeys when they're having sex. So that was what that song was. And by the way, if you really know anything about Paul McCartney's songs that he's written and so on, he's the most uninhibited of the Beatles. In fact, not too long ago, he admitted that he had group masturbation with John Lennon and some other of his mates, his buddies back in Liverpool when they were teenagers.
That's right. He did admit that. So what about the Maharishi now? You know, here is a guru. He's a man. Okay. What about him with the women out there? Was it free love there with the Maharishi, or did he stay away from the women?
Maharishi claimed to be Bal Brahmachari. That means a life celibate. However, because I was in the inner circle, I know several women. I know more than 5 women who either had sex with Maharishi or were bidden to.
So was the legend
not me, by the way, not me.
So you not you, but the legend of Maharishi. Was there a legend? Was it a talk or the Maharishi? It's cosmic with him. Was it a talk around the people would talk about the Maharishi or
No, actually,
no?
no, not at all.
Mm-mm.
Mia Farrow was in India with the Beatles. She was there for the first part of the course. She actually left a month before John and George left. So people think that that John and George left in a huff from India because of Mia Farrow. It had nothing to do with her. She was already gone.
Mm-hmm.
However, she did tell people in India, she told in a private party, she told some people that Maharishi had made a pass at her.
Mm.
They certainly didn't believe it. They thought she must be out of her mind. And they asked her to describe it. And she said, oh, he touched my hair. And they said, oh, but that, he just touched your hair. And that's no, he would touch people's heads. He would often, not often, but sometimes he put his hand like that over someone's head to give them a blessing. So they figured that's what he had done. But she said, hey, I know a pass from a puja, meaning he was doing a ceremony for her called a puja ceremony. It was for her birthday. And then, so no one really knew about that except for a very small number of people. But then she came back to the States and she told Ned Wynn about it. Now, Ned Wynn was Keenan Wynn's son and Ed Wynn's grandson.
Yeah.
And by the way, I had an affair with Ned, so I knew him quite well.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, he was a lover of mine for a while. So in any case, he wrote a book called We Always Live in Beverly Hills. And in that book, he talks about his conversation he had with Mia when she came back from India. And she said, listen, I know a pass from a puja, and he definitely tried to make it with me. So, and then in her biography later, which was, 20, 30 years later, decades later, she talked about that he had put his arms around her. She said she suddenly felt these hairy arms going around her when she was downstairs in his cave, in his puja room. So she described it. But then she also said in that book that she wasn't sure if it was really a pass. So she kind of backpedaled on it.
It's a little The Boy Cried Wolf over there. It's starting to sound
a
like.
little bit, yeah. But I have to tell you that I believe that he made a pass at her because I know too many women. I know a lot of women who admitted to me what he had done.
And the stories all match up at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And one of the women actually wrote a book. She wrote a book. Her name's Judith Bork. She wrote a book called Robes of Silk, Feet of Clay.
Yeah.
That was the name of the book. And she went into great detail about her relationship with Maharishi. And she was there with me in India when it was going on.
Wow. So it was, but they kept it a secret?
It was all a secret, still kept a secret.
I mean, wow.
It's absolutely kept under wraps. I am going to talk about it more frankly in the book that I'm writing right now, which is called How India Influenced the Beatles. I'm writing a book by that title where I'm going to go into that a little more. I went into it, maybe there's one page in my book, Maharishi and Me, about that. Because it's not really the topic of my book. Yeah,
it's about, pretty interesting story about the Maharishi, especially nowadays where the world is and everybody is coming out about people and all this. Is there a song that the Beatles wrote that pretty much describes him being that guy? What song is that, would you say?
Sexy Sadie. Sexy Sadie.
Okay.
That was originally Maharishi. It was Maharishi, you blip and blip. What the blip have you done? And it was very explicit with expletives. And it was written by John Lennon as they were waiting for the taxis to come and take them away from India. And taxis take them away from Rishikesh, India. And when George saw what John was doing, he said, you can't sing now. What are you doing? So then they changed it to Sexy Sadie, which has the same number of syllables as Maharishi. So it fit the song.
Very interesting. I never thought of that. Wow. Wow. And Lennon was one to play with the words and letters of signs or whatnot.
Yeah, he loved
In his
to.
song, he
And
loved
you
to.
wonder whether maybe they were trying to say sexy sadhu. Sexy
Interesting.
sadhu.
Interesting. It's pretty, Susan, you're pretty good at this stuff. You know a lot going on there. I think this book has a lot of good stuff in here, and I think people should check this book out. I mean, this is definitely good. And the pictures are great in it as well. And
Yeah, it has over 100 pictures in that book. It's really well illustrated book.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have a lot. What about Cynthia Lennon? We all know that the marriage was on the rocks with John and Cynthia, and around that time Yoko was out there in the wings. Did the Maharishi, you think, ever try to make a pass at Cynthia? I talked to you, and and maybe that was another thing that made Lennon want to like fly out or whatnot.
No, I only know about 3 women when the Beatles were in Rishikesh. There were 3 women. One was Mia.
Mm-hmm.
The second one's name was Benita Glossner from Sweden. And the third was Rosalind. And Rosalind was the one that Alexis Mardis was having an affair with,
Mm-hmm.
and that claimed that Maharishi had made a pass at her.
Mm.
And nobody believed it. They thought she's out of her mind, or, there's no way, and Paul Horn, who was a flautist, very famous musician, he commented on it, and he said that they were just stirring up rumors, and that Alexis and Alexis and her were just trying to make a controversy. And in fact, Alexis Mardis, who is known as Magic Alex,
Mm-hmm.
he told Charlie Lutz, Captain Kundalini, Charlie Lutz, the man who was Maharishi's main man in the United States, Alexis admitted to him that he came to India only for one purpose, and that was to break up the Beatles with Maharishi,
Wow.
to separate the Beatles from Maharishi.
Wow.
And Charlie said, why would you do that? And he said, well, we don't want Maharishi to have that much control over the boys, as if he was in charge of the Beatles or something.
What?
So he definitely encouraged the rumor and stirred it up and made it into a big thing with John Lennon and George, and finally convinced them that Maharishi had made a pass at Rosalind.
Interesting. So see, there's a lot of people in there too, a lot of troublemakers in the scene. See, here you have the Maharishi trying to get everybody to free themselves and enjoy. Then you have the troublemakers, but then the Maharishi is also a man. So there's a lot. It's a soap opera in India.
Absolutely. And when they got back,
Mm-hmm.
Paul said to John, "Well, what went on over there? Why did you leave? Early?" Because they were going to stay for the whole thing. And John said, "Oh, he's just an old lech, just like everyone else." And he was trying to get it off with Mia and some other women there. And Paul said, "Well, but he never claimed to be anything but a meditation teacher." And Paul commented that he thought it was really very prudish of John to be like that. And really, John Lennon, prudish,
Right.
He was. And the reality is that on the way back to London, on the plane, John got very drunk, and he admitted to Cynthia on the plane all of his indiscretions, like 300 women or whatever it was that he'd had sex with. And she was in complete shock because she thought that John had been faithful to her throughout their entire marriage.
Wow. What a plane ride for her.
And by the way, after that, in November, same time the White Album came out, guess what else came out? Two Virgins album with John and Yoko.
That's right.
In the buff,
Mm-hmm.
on the cover.
That's right.
So, the prudish John, who's so self-righteous.
There's two sides to John.
What can I say?
There was two sides to John, wow. Pretty heavy.
I personally don't have an issue about the fact that Maharishi had sex with women or made passes at them.
Mm-hmm.
he's a man, even though he was hypocritical because he claimed to be Bal Brahmachari, meaning life celibate. I don't fault him for it.
No.
The reality is he was focused 99.99999%. All of his focus, all of his life was dedicated to helping the world to create world peace. That was his expressed goal. It was the only thing he ever thought about.
Yeah, that was
so he wanted to create a world at peace, and he wanted to get as many people as possible to meditate. So he trained 40,000 people to meditate during his lifetime. And 40,000 teachers. He trained 40,000 teachers of transcendental meditation during his lifetime. And those teachers taught 6 million people to meditate during Maharishi's lifetime.
Wow.
That's quite an accomplishment.
That definitely is. And you know what? This book, Maharishi and Me, Susan, we'll put the link here for everybody to find that. If I get a good right there without the light glaring on it. Wonderful book. I want to thank you for coming on today. I'd like to end the show with a little drama. Who is your celebrity crush?
Celebrity crush. Ugh.
Just say
okay,
me.
well,
Just
let's
say
go
me.
back to George Harrison.
Wow.
George Harrison of the Beatles.
All right.
He's always my celebrity crush.
Right.
That's a good one. On that note, we love you, everybody. Big mazel. Mwah.
Thank you,
Dr.
Susan.
Steeple, Dr. G, we love you. But Susan, thank you so much for being our guest here today. Everybody, a little splash of happiness and love. Mwah. Goodbye.
It's coffee talk with the Tika. Nothing rhymes with that but chicken tikka. We name drop here. Stefan and all his friends.
You guys got me right there. I'm just reading my friends. Oh, Susan, you're here too. I just happen to be reading your book. I want to show everybody out there in the world. Please, everybody, please check it out. I will put all the good descriptions right there. But that's our friend Susan. And before we go, thank you guys. But click up there, click over here, up there, there. And remember, subscribe, share, love one another, and always be steepling. Right, Dr. G? Always steeple, huh, Dr. G? That's right. Mwah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.